Hey, who's that good-looking guy? Tessa's question came out of nowhere, stopping both Ryan and their friend Elise in their tracks before they even stepped through the backyard gate. Elise followed Tessa's gaze and spotted the man in question, one of Derek's buddies. Derek, of course, was Tessa's brother-in-law. "Just so you know, I'm standing right here," Ryan remarked, shooting his wife a look. Tessa smirked. "Oh, come on. Can't a woman appreciate a fine-looking man when she sees one?" "If you have to, I'd rather you keep it to yourself," Ryan replied flatly, clearly unimpressed. Then, deciding to move on, he turned his attention to their host. "Hey, Dee, sorry about that." Elise and her husband, Wesley, were throwing a birthday party for their daughter, who had just hit the milestone age of 13. Though Elise had seen them coming, she hadn't greeted them yet. Ignoring Tessa's comment, she simply waved them inside. "No big deal. Come on in," she said, holding the gate open. Ryan hoisted up the case of beer he was carrying. "Where do you want these?" "Over by the tree. There are coolers with ice. Some are for the kids' sodas, the rest are for the beer. Just find an empty one." "Gifts go on that table over there," Elise directed, nodding toward a table already holding a neatly wrapped present. Just then, Wesley spotted them and walked over with a friendly grin. "Hey, you two. Glad you could make it," he said, giving Tessa a quick kiss on the cheek. Then he reached for the case of beer. "Here, Ryan, let me take that." But Tessa wasn't quite done with her earlier train of thought. "Hey, Wesley, who's that guy sitting over there with your brother?" Wesley followed her gaze, unaware of the earlier conversation. "Oh, that's Zane. He works construction with Derek." "Why? Do you know him?" "Nope," Tessa said, a little too quickly, "but I sure wouldn't mind getting to know him. Guy looks like he was sculpted from marble." Wesley shot Ryan a curious glance. "Trying to keep things light," he chuckled. "Careful, Ryan. Sounds like she's shopping for an upgrade." Ryan forced a laugh, though his jaw tightened slightly. "Yeah, seems like my trade-in value's dropping fast." Elise playfully swatted Ryan's arm. All right, let's get inside before you two start negotiating a divorce in my backyard." "Wesley, show Tessa where to put the gifts, will you?" Wesley nodded, leading Tessa to the gift table. But Elise had caught the look on his face. He wanted answers. Lowering her voice, she leaned in. "All right, spill it. What's going on? Did you and Ryan have a fight?" Tessa feigned innocence. What are you talking about?" Elise wasn't buying it. "Come on. I've known you too long. You've never talked like this in front of Ryan before." "Something's up." Tessa sighed. "I'm just giving him a little taste of his own medicine. He flirts with every pretty girl he lays eyes on." Elise's eyebrows lifted. "Since when?" "Sarah Roberts saw him at a restaurant a few days ago. He didn't see her, but she saw him, flirting with some waitress. And guess what? She kissed him." Elise hesitated. "Tessa, you know Ryan. He's just naturally friendly. That's how he is." Tessa crossed her arms. "A girl kissing you is more than just being friendly, Patty. That's crossing a line." Elise shrugged. "Wesley just kissed you on the cheek a minute ago. That's different. We've known each other for years. This waitress? She's a stranger. And from what I hear, Ryan flirts with her all the time. I don't like it. And it sure as hell doesn't pass the wife test." Elise squinted. "The wife test?" "Yeah. You know how guys always use the husband test? A wife shouldn't do anything she wouldn't do in front of her husband. Well, same rule applies. What's good for the goose?" Elise let out a sigh. "And you thought my daughter's birthday party was the perfect time for this little experiment?" Tessa lifted a shoulder. "I wasn't planning it, but then I saw Derek's friend over there, and, well, he's perfect for making Ryan squirm." Elise groaned. "Just don't start a fight, okay?" Tessa held up a hand. "I swear. No fights. Besides, that guy looks like he could snap Ryan in half. He'd be a fool to start something." Elise exhaled. "Fine, but I've got more guests arriving, so I gotta go. Just keep it under control, okay? Relax, Patty. I've got this." Tessa spotted Elizabeth, the birthday girl, chatting with her friends. Seemed like a good time to go say happy birthday. Coincidentally, Ryan had the same idea, now that he'd finished handling the beer. They both arrived at the same time. "Happy birthday, sweetheart. You're officially a teenager." That means you get to give your parents an even harder time, Tessa teased. Ryan smirked. That goes for me too, Jin. Happy birthday. But let's go easy on the hard time part, huh? Elizabeth laughed, used to Ryan's humor. Thanks, she said, hugging Tessa before giving Ryan a quick peck on the cheek. These are my friends, Heather, Megan, and Laura, she introduced. After a little chit-chat, Tessa was ready to get back to business. Hey, sweetie, she said to Elizabeth. I'm gonna go say hi to your uncle. Catch you later. Ryan was about to follow when Wesley gave him a subtle signal to hang back. Meanwhile, Tessa strolled over to Derek and his friend. Hey, Derek. Tessa. Hey, how's it going? Can't complain. Who's your friend? Derek hesitated a second before the guy introduced himself. I'm Zane. Guess you mean me? Tessa grinned. Who else? Derek glanced around. Hey, Tessa. Where's Ryan? Over there with your brother. I'd love one of those, she said, pointing at the beer Zane was holding. Derek huffed but gave in. Zane, be a gentleman. Get Tessa a beer while we chat. Not wanting to seem rude, Zane stood and made his way to the coolers. Tessa took his seat. From across the yard, she spotted Ryan watching, his expression tight. She smirked. Plan was working. At the coolers, Derek approached Wesley and Ryan. Okay, what's up with Tessa? Ryan frowned. Why? What's she doing? Getting real cozy with Zane over there. Ryan followed Derek's gaze. Who is he? Works with me. We're on the high-rise project downtown. Good guy, but bit of a ladies' man. Ryan tensed. He come with a date? Nope. Last-minute invite. His golf plans got canceled, so I brought him along. He was bored. It clicked. Ryan finally understood. Tessa was playing a game, and if he knew anything about his wife, it was that once she set her mind to something, there was no stopping her until she got exactly what she wanted. Ignoring Tessa completely might only make her double down, but calling her out, especially in front of Zane, could turn this into a full-blown scene. Ryan wanted to avoid that at all costs. Leaning closer to Derek, he kept his voice low. Do me a favor, keep an eye on things. If this starts going sideways, let me know. Derek gave a slight nod, grabbed a cold beer from the cooler, and walked back to where Tessa and Zane were talking. Handing Tessa her drink, he decided to steer the conversation in a different direction. Ryan's shots from the lumberyard fire were incredible, don't you think? He said, casually tossing it into the mix. Might even enter the press photography contest again this year. It was an attempt to shift the focus, to remind Zane exactly who Tessa's husband was. Tessa, clearly unimpressed with the subject change, responded with a polite but dismissive tone. Yeah, Ryan's planning to enter. Then, turning toward Zane, she added, my husband works as a photographer for the Tribune. He actually won several awards at last year's state competition. Zane gave a slight smirk, glancing across the yard toward Ryan. So that's your husband? Tessa nodded. Yep, that's Ryan. Her tone made it sound like an afterthought. Zane leaned back, shifting the topic smoothly to his love for working with his hands. How there was something satisfying about building things that lasted. He directed a question at Derek, who answered, hoping to pivot the conversation away from Ryan. But Tessa wasn't interested in changing course. She turned her attention right back to Zane, effortlessly leaving Derek out of the discussion. Derek got the message loud and clear. His interference wasn't helping. It was only giving Zane more time to enjoy Tessa's attention. With a sigh, he excused himself and headed off to check on his niece. Ryan, meanwhile, was doing his best to socialize with other guests, but his eyes kept drifting back to Tessa and Zane. The men at the party weren't saying much about it, but the women? They were eating it up. He caught bits of conversation from Josie and her friends, whispers about how Ryan worked dangerous assignments as a newspaper photographer and how they were surprised he hadn't stepped in yet. Ryan smirked to himself. They don't get it. Zane wasn't the real issue here. Tessa was. No matter how much it annoyed him, he wasn't the type to start a fight over something like this. That wasn't his style. But what did concern him was Tessa's drinking. An empty beer bottle sat by her chair, and she was already working on another one. She tended to drink more when she was nervous, something Ryan had noticed over the years. Zane wasn't far behind. He had 3 empty bottles lined up beside him. Before Ryan could decide what to do, Wesley's voice rang out, announcing that the food was ready. The scent of grilled meat filled the air as Wesley ran through the options: burgers, brats, chicken patties, and an assortment of sides. Ryan saw his opening. If he could get Zane away from Tessa, maybe he could talk to her privately and put an end to this before it got any worse. But just as he stepped forward, he saw them both stand, beers abandoned on the table. Then he noticed something else. Zane had his hand on Tessa's elbow. Nope, not happening. Ryan was across the yard in an instant. Excuse me, mind taking your hand off my wife? His tone was calm, but there was no mistaking the edge in his voice. Zane immediately let go, palms up like he was surrendering. Relax, man. We were just heading to grab some food. Yeah, well, I'll take it from here, Ryan shot back, taking Tessa's arm and leading her toward the food table. Tessa yanked her arm free. What the hell, Ryan? That was rude. Ryan didn't even flinch. Get some food. We need to talk. By the shed. Over by the coolers. Derek wasted no time cornering Zane. What are you doing? He asked in a low voice. She's married to one of my brother's closest friends. Leave her alone. Zane gave an easy shrug. Hey, she's the one flirting with me. I'm just going with the flow. Derek scoffed. Going with the flow? Come on, Zane. She's using you to get back at Ryan over some waitress. Zane's smirk didn't budge. That's so? Stay out of it, Derek. I don't turn down beautiful women when they're interested. Derek's patience was wearing thin. She's not. Trust me. This is my niece's birthday party. I don't want drama. Zane held up his hands. Fine, fine. If she comes to me again, I'll send her back to her husband. Derek's expression darkened. If you don't, you're out of here. I mean it. Zane gave a lazy salute. Scout's honor. Now, can I grab some food? Derek exhaled sharply. Yeah, go ahead. Surprisingly, Tessa wasn't too upset about Ryan stepping in. Zane had started getting a little too comfortable, and his suggestive comments were starting to get old. Plus, Ryan's firm grip on her arm had made something clear. She had officially hit his limit. She had promised Elise there wouldn't be any drama, and now, seeing that Ryan wasn't the kind of guy to get rattled by someone like Zane, she figured she'd made her point. They filled their plates, and Ryan led her to a quiet spot near the shed. Here, hold this while I grab some chairs, he said, voice steady despite the tension still thick between them. Even in his frustration, he kept his manners. He set up the chairs and sat down, but after a few bites of food, he couldn't hold it in anymore. All right, he said bluntly. What's this about me flirting with a waitress? Tessa avoided his gaze. I heard you were seen flirting with a waitress last week. Ryan let out a sharp laugh. Oh yeah? And who exactly told you this? Tessa hesitated. Does it matter? Someone saw you. Ryan shook his head, exasperated. Tessa, I haven't flirted with any waitress. Either this is a mistake, or someone's lying. Since we started dating, I've only kissed you. Tessa finally looked at him, searching his face. She usually trusted her gut when it came to reading him, but this time, she wasn't sure. Why would someone say they saw you kissing a waitress if it didn't happen? Ryan shrugged, taking another bite of his burger. No idea. But since this mysterious someone is your friend, why don't you just ask her? Tessa narrowed her eyes. How do you know it was a woman? Ryan smirked. It better be a woman. Because if some guy told you he saw me kissing a waitress, then you've already got your answer. Tessa had expected Ryan to be defensive, to deny everything outright. But something about his last comment threw her off. For the first time, she wasn't so sure what to believe. What do you mean, if it's a man? I've answered my own question. Ryan leaned back slightly, arms crossed. Simple. If a guy told you he saw me kissing a waitress, he's probably got an agenda. Maybe he's into you and trying to stir up trouble. You ever think about that? He could be pretending to be a concerned friend just to get closer to you. Tessa scoffed. That's ridiculous. Is it? Ryan challenged. Think about it. Was it a man? A pause. Then, begrudgingly, Tessa muttered, No. Ryan nodded. Well, there you go. We're back to square one. That means you need to ask your friend why she's making this up. An uneasy silence settled between them as they focused on finishing their meals. The tension still hung in the air, but neither of them wanted to escalate things further. When they were done, Ryan wiped his hands on a napkin and leveled his gaze at Tessa. Listen, this is Josie's birthday party, and I'm not about to let it turn into a disaster over a fight with your friend. But if you keep cozying up to Zane like you have been, I'm done. I'll leave you here, and you can find your own way home. Hell, maybe you and Mr. Muscles can spend the night together. Just know that if you do, you won't have a home to come back to. Understand? Tessa's breath hitched slightly. She wasn't expecting him to be this intense. Ryan, calm down, she said, her voice quieter now. I'm not going home with Zane. That thought never even crossed my mind. I just wanted you to see what it feels like, to watch your spouse flirt with someone else. Ryan exhaled, shaking his head. Well, congratulations. You made your point. Now let's end this. Without waiting for a response, he stood, grabbed her empty plate and beer bottle, and walked over to toss them in the trash. When he turned back, he felt a small sense of relief. Tessa was still standing there, right by his side. Zane, however, didn't look nearly as composed. From across the yard, Ryan caught the other man throwing glances their way, his jaw set in irritation. Sitting alone with his half-eaten chicken patty, Zane looked anything but pleased. Ryan had a feeling Zane hadn't just been toying around. He had fully expected Tessa to reciprocate, maybe even slip away with him. Whatever fantasies Zane had been cooking up, they weren't happening now. Zane knew it too. For the rest of the evening, Tessa stuck close to Ryan, drifting off occasionally to chat with friends, but always circling back to him. The tension from earlier began to settle. That is, until the group gathered around Josie's birthday cake. As the crowd sang happy birthday, Zane sidled up next to Tessa. Under the cover of music and laughter, he casually slid his hand down and gave her backside a squeeze. Tessa stiffened. At first, she thought it was Ryan, but when she glanced over and saw him standing a few feet away, she turned her head and caught Zane grinning at her, smug as ever. Shock jolted through her. She instinctively checked to see if anyone else had noticed, but everyone's attention was locked on Josie, who was blowing out her candles. Her gut reaction was to slap him right then and there. But she knew that would only cause a scene, something she wanted desperately to avoid. Besides, she had led him on earlier. Whether she liked it or not, she had given him a reason to think this was okay. She clenched her jaw, forcing herself to stay still. She'd deal with it later, set things straight and make it clear she wasn't interested. Zane, however, saw her silence as something else. To him, it was permission. He was good at this game. He could read between the lines. She had to stay close to Ryan to keep up appearances, but eventually, she'd have to step away. Maybe for a drink, maybe to use the restroom. And when she did, he'd be waiting. After dinner, the party picked up. Wesley turned up the outdoor speakers, letting Pandora play in the background. The guests spread out. Some gathered around a dartboard pinned to the old oak tree near the shed. Others set up bean-bag toss and bingo tables. Josie and her friends challenged the adults to a best-of-3 beanbag game. Ryan and Tessa joined in, despite Wesley's warning that Josie had a deadly aim. They managed to win the first round, but the teens claimed victory in the next two. After the game, Tessa leaned in and kissed Ryan on the cheek. I need to use the restroom. I'll be right back. Ryan nodded. Might challenge Derek to a game of darts while you're gone. Tessa chatted with a few friends on her way inside, relieved to find the downstairs bathroom unoccupied. Meanwhile, at the dartboard, Derek frowned as he noticed movement by the gate. Zane's leaving, he muttered, catching Ryan's attention mid-throw. Ryan lowered his dart. What? Derek nodded toward the fence. He's walking out without saying goodbye. Didn't even thank anyone for the invite. Ryan followed his gaze, watching as Zane slipped through the gate. Probably pissed because Tessa's not giving him attention anymore. My guess? He had plans with her. Derek sighed, shaking his head. Wouldn't surprise me. He's got away with women. Seen him leave bars with some of the best-looking ones. Ryan turned back to the dartboard, aiming carefully. But then a thought struck him. How would someone enter the house without being seen? He lowered the dart, his Essaniac tightening. Through the gate. Circle around to the front. Enter from there. His jaw clenched. Handing his darts to Derek, he muttered, I'll be right back. Tessa was finishing up, fixing her makeup in the mirror. Just as she opened the bathroom door, she froze. Zane was standing there. Before she could react, he grabbed her by the shoulders and shoved her back against the door frame. Then, without warning, he kissed her. For a moment, Tessa's brain short-circuited, struggling to catch up to what was happening. Had Ryan been a split second later, he would have walked in on his wife still frozen, still processing the shock of it. But Ryan wasn't a second later. He saw them, and that was all it took. In a flash, he grabbed Zane by the shoulder and yanked him back, his fist already swinging. The punch landed hard against Zane's solar plexus, sending him stumbling into the washroom, collapsing to one knee as he gasped for breath. Tessa barely moved, still overwhelmed by the sudden, violent shift in events. Everything had happened so fast. Zane was struggling to breathe. Ryan was standing over him, fists clenched. And Tessa was still trying to process the fact that Zane had just kissed her. Tessa spun around, searching for Ryan, but he was gone. Panic surged through her as she hurried through the house, calling his name. No answer. Then she heard it, the unmistakable sound of an engine starting. Bolting for the front door, she arrived just in time to see their car backing out of the driveway. Before she could do anything, Ryan pulled onto the road and disappeared into the night. Her Essaniac dropped. She could only imagine what he must have been thinking, especially after the way she had been flirting with Zane earlier. Ignoring Zane, who was still struggling to catch his breath in the hallway, Tessa sprinted out the back door. The first person she saw was Derek, still standing outside, waiting for Ryan to return, completely unaware of what had just gone down inside. "Derek, you have to drive me home," she pleaded, her voice shaking. "Please, I need your help." Derek's face twisted in confusion. "Tessa? What's going on? Where's Ryan?" She barely got the words out. "He left. He caught Zane kissing me." Derek's eyebrows shot up. "Wait, what?" His gaze darted toward the house. "And Zane? Is he?" "He's still inside. I don't know if he's hurt, but Ryan hit him. Really hard." Derek blinked, then let out an amused huff. "Ryan punched Zane?" Tessa nodded frantically. "Yes, Derek, please. I need to get home. Ryan was furious. I'm afraid he's going to leave me." Derek sighed. "Tessa, look, I know he's mad, but I highly doubt he's going to leave you over this." She shook her head. "You didn't see him, Derek. He's never looked at me like that before." She motioned toward the cars parked tightly in the driveway. "I'm blocked in. I can't get my car out. Please, you have to help me." Derek hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, let me talk to Wesley and see what I can do." He disappeared for a moment and returned shortly after. "Tessa, you'll have to call a cab. I can't get my car out either. But you can take mine." Tessa's eyes widened. "Are you serious? Go. Before I change my mind." Relief flooded her. "Derek, thank you. Thank you so much." She wasted no time climbing into his car, her only thought being, "I have to get home before it's too late." Derek carefully maneuvered the vehicle out of the cramped driveway, weaving around the parked cars with precision. Tessa barely noticed. The whole drive, her mind raced. Ryan's reaction tonight had shaken her. She had never seen him this angry before. His temper had always been steady. Even in arguments, he never raised his voice. But tonight, the way he had looked at her before walking out, it terrified her. By the time they reached the house, her Essaniac was twisted in knots. Derek parked behind Ryan's car in the driveway. He hesitated before turning to her. "You want me to go in with you?" Tessa swallowed hard, shaking her head. "No, I need to do this alone." "You sure?" She nodded. Derek sighed. "All right. Call me if you need anything." "Thank you, Derek. For everything." She stepped out of the car and climbed the porch steps, each one heavier than the last. Taking a deep breath, she stepped inside. Silence. Her heart pounded. Was he upstairs, packing his bags? Just as she turned toward the staircase, she heard the hum of the coffee grinder from the kitchen. A flicker of hope sparked inside her. She followed the sound and found Ryan standing in the doorway, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. "Did your lover drive you home?" His voice was cold. Tessa's heart clenched. "Ryan, stop. Zane is not my lover." The last time I saw him, he was still on the bathroom floor, gasping for air. Ryan gave a slow nod but said nothing. The silence between them stretched, thick and suffocating. Tessa hated this. She would rather him yell, explode. Anything but this icy indifference. Since he wasn't going to speak, she did. Ryan. He caught me off guard. I wasn't participating. He ambushed me, pushed me against the door and kissed me before I even knew what was happening. Ryan's jaw tightened. I didn't see you fighting him off. Tessa's voice rose in frustration. You intervened before I even had a chance. I was stunned, Ryan. It took me a second to process what was happening, but you punched him before I could push him away. Ryan still wouldn't look at her. Instead, he turned back to the coffee maker, pressing the start button. The soft dripping of coffee was the only sound in the room. Tessa's pulse pounded. She couldn't stand this quiet fury. Say something, Ryan. He finally turned, his gaze sharp. What do you want me to say? Tessa exhaled. I don't know. I've never seen you this angry before. I thought you'd be packing your bags when I got home. Ryan let out a bitter chuckle. Don't tempt me. His voice turned sharp. You want to know why I'm pissed? That stunt you pulled? It was immature, disrespectful. And the only reason I'm not more furious is that most of the people at the party knew what you were doing. Tessa flinched. Ryan wasn't finished. But do you know what really gets me? You trusted some shallow friend over me. Have I ever lied to you? Have I ever given you a reason to doubt me? She shook her head. No, never. Hearing him refer to her friends as shallow stung, but she let it go. That wasn't the point right now. Ryan, I know you're outgoing. You make friends easily, even with women, and maybe you don't notice it, but I see how they look at you when you walk away. The moment you're not looking, their whole demeanor changes. Ryan groaned. Oh, come on. You're making me sound like some kind of heartthrob. Tessa exhaled. I'm just saying, people are drawn to you, Ryan. Some women don't care that you're married. They see you as available, whether you realize it or not. Ryan's expression hardened. And that justifies you believing I go around kissing waitresses? Trusting her over me? Tessa swallowed. She had hoped to avoid this confrontation, but here they were. Their argument dragged on for another 20 minutes, neither willing to back down on the issue of trust. Despite the tension, they didn't sleep in separate rooms that night. But there was no intimacy. Ryan wasn't in a forgiving mood, and Tessa wasn't ready to grovel. The following Tuesday, Ryan met Wesley for a drink after work. He was already at the bar, sipping his beer, when Wesley arrived, grinning. Yo, Rocky, how's Adrian? Wesley teased, attempting his best Stallone impression. Ryan shot him a look. Isn't Rocky the one who talks like that? Wesley shrugged. Yeah, but I can't do a Burgess Meredith impression, so you get what you get. Chuckling, he sat down and ordered a beer. Seriously though, how are things with you two? Ryan exhaled. We're barely talking. I'm still mad, and she knows it. So she keeps her distance. Wesley took a sip. How long are you planning to keep that up? Most people at the party didn't even realize anything happened. After you left, folks were asking about you and Tessa. Ryan raised a brow. What did you tell them? Just that something came up and you guys had to leave. Nobody questioned it. They probably just thought you wanted to get home early. Ryan let out a dry laugh. Yeah, well, there hasn't been much of that since the party. Zane was just getting to his feet when he grumbled. You sucker punched me? Ryan shrugged. Yeah, I sure did. Wesley burst out laughing. Well, you did. Ryan smirked. He was talking about getting back at me, wasn't he? Wesley nodded. Yeah, but I made sure to steer him away from that idea. Told him you're not someone to mess with. Ryan raised an eyebrow. And that worked? Wesley grinned. Oh, absolutely. I even threw in a Bible quote for good measure. Ryan blinked. You quoted the Bible? Yep. Though he walks through the valley of the shadow of death, he fears no evil, because he knows you're the toughest, meanest son of a gun in the valley. Wesley said, eyes twinkling. Ryan chuckled. That's nonsense, and you know it. Of course I do. And you know it. But Zane? Zane doesn't. I think I scared him enough to make him think twice before ever crossing you again. Ryan grinned, clinking his beer against Wesley's. Well, I appreciate that. They both took a sip, letting the moment settle before Ryan spoke again. You know what really gets under my skin? Ryan muttered. Wesley tilted his head. That Tessa doesn't believe you? Ryan exhaled. Exactly. I mean, I didn't kiss any waitress. I swear. Wesley studied him for a beat. Are you absolutely sure? Not even a peck on the cheek? Something small you might not have thought twice about? Ryan started to shake his head, then hesitated. A memory flashed through his mind. Wesley caught the change in his expression instantly. Uh-huh. You did kiss her, didn't you? Ryan sighed. No. She kissed me. His Essaniac twisted. Damn, Wesley muttered. Now it makes sense. The next day, Tessa was caught off guard when Ryan walked into her office. Come on. I'm taking you to lunch. She blinked. Oh? I mean, thanks, but it's a little early. Can we wait about 20 minutes? Ryan shook his head. No need. I already spoke to your boss, told him it was a minor family emergency. You've got an extended lunch hour. That made her uneasy. A family emergency? She echoed, standing reluctantly. Ryan, what's this about? Just get in the car. His tone was firm, but not angry. Still, Tessa's nerves were creeping up fast. As they pulled away from her office, she finally asked, Where are we going? You'll see. That did nothing to settle her nerves. Ryan, she tried again. Call your friend. Ask her which restaurant she supposedly saw me kissing that waitress. Tessa hesitated. Why? Ryan glanced at her briefly before turning back to the road. Just trust me. After a pause, Tessa pulled out her phone and dialed. Hey, Sarah. Quick question. Where did you see Ryan with that waitress? A beat. Then Sarah responded. Tessa frowned. DR's on Herman Avenue? Ryan smirked. That's a funny coincidence. Tessa's stomach dropped. Why? Ryan kept driving. Because that's exactly where we're going. Her fingers curled against her lap as a sinking feeling took hold. Was he going to prove something? Confront her? Maybe even flirt with the waitress in front of her just to teach her a lesson? No, that wasn't Ryan. Still, she stayed silent, dreading what was about to unfold. The drive felt endless, but soon enough, they pulled into the parking lot. As soon as they stepped inside, Tessa's heart started pounding. Ryan scanned the room, then spotted an open booth. Come on. She slid into the seat first, feeling like a kid about to get scolded. Then, from across the restaurant, a friendly voice called out. Well, look who finally brought his better half. Tessa's stomach twisted as she turned and saw their waitress approaching. Hi, Melody. Melody beamed. Hi, Tessa. How'd you manage to drag my cousin here for a real lunch? Every time I see him, he's in such a rush he barely eats. Tessa's entire body went still. Her cousin? Ryan leaned back against the booth, watching as it all clicked into place. Seems Tessa thinks you and I have been having a passionate affair. Tessa nearly choked. What? No, Melody, that's not true. Ryan just looked at her. Go on. Tell her what Sarah told you. Tessa's face burned. She turned to Melody, ashamed. A friend of mine said she saw Ryan kiss a waitress here. I had no idea it was you. Melody blinked, then laughed. Oh, that? Last week, when you stopped by, I gave you a peck on the cheek when you walked in. She turned to Tessa. It was nothing, Tessa. Just a friendly gesture. Tessa exhaled sharply. Melody, I am so sorry. Melody waved it off. Don't worry about it. But maybe have a talk with that friend of yours? Ryan smirked. Actually, I'd love to hear that conversation. Tessa met his challenge head-on. She pulled out her phone and dialed. Melody and Ryan sat in amused silence, listening to her side of the conversation. Hey, Sarah. Not great. You know that waitress you saw kissing Ryan? That was his cousin. Silence. Yeah, his cousin. You made it sound like he was having an affair. More silence. I don't care what you thought you saw. And from now on, keep your gossip to yourself. I don't care if you think you see him screwing someone in the middle of the floor. Keep your mouth shut. She hung up, nearly cracking her phone in frustration. Ryan smirked. That was satisfying. Tessa let out a long sigh. Ryan, I really am sorry. You should be. And you still have a few more apologies to make when we get home. Wesley, Elise, Josie? Tessa nodded. And Zane? Ryan scoffed. Zane can take a hike. No decent guy pursues a married woman, no matter how much of a flirt she is. Melody, still standing nearby, blinked. Wait, who's Zane? Ryan grinned. Her boyfriend. Melody snorted. Boyfriend? Tessa rolled her eyes. Ignore him, Melody. I messed up, and he's milking it for all it's worth. Melody smirked. Sounds like you two had quite the weekend. Ryan leaned back. Let's just say Tessa learned a valuable lesson about trust. Tessa's face flushed as she flipped open the menu. So, Melody, what do you recommend? That night, after Tessa spent an hour calling Wesley, Elise, and Josie to apologize, she curled into bed beside Ryan. Are you still mad? She whispered. Ryan turned, his voice low. Depends. On what? On whether you still think I'd cheat on you. Tessa exhaled. I never really thought you would. I just didn't want you leading anyone on. Ryan considered that. Then, just as he was about to tell her he forgave her, he felt her hand slide down his body. Tessa smirked. Come on, honey. You can't stay mad at me. Ryan chuckled, deciding he'd make her work a little harder for that forgiveness. After all, some lessons were best learned thoroughly.